In 2006, the French government made it illegal to share a gardening recipe, not a drug formula, not a weapons manual, a recipe for a liquid brewed from a weed in roadside ditches. The official reason was safety. The simpler one, you cannot file a patent on a weed from a ditch. 5 liquids fed farms before synthetic fertilizer. 1 was banned. All of them still work. Every one of them was built for the plant you have already given up on. In 1842, a London businessman named John Bennett Laws opened the world's first artificial fertilizer factory. He took bone meal, poured sulfuric acid over it, and sold the result as superphosphate. 8,000 years of farming on manure and legumes had just met its first industrial competitor. Within 2 generations, the methods that had kept every farm in Europe and Asia productive for centuries were being called primitive. 5 of them were quietly disappearing. A fermented rice water that wakes up soil microbes in 3 days. A manure brew, older than the fertilizer industry. A living compost tea that dies if you stop aerating it. A plant with roots 10 feet deep that drags potassium up from below your garden. And the weed water recipe France made illegal for 5 years. Every one of them can be made at home for almost nothing. Not one of them requires a trip to a garden center. In December 1954, a British horticulturalist named Lawrence D. Hills leased 3/4 of an acre in Barking, Essex. He had one purpose: to study a single plant he believed was being quietly forgotten: Russian comfrey. Hills was a gardener and a journalist watching practical knowledge disappear. Fertilizer sacks arriving, old routines dropping away. He wanted to breed comfrey, measure it, and make sure what he found could not be lost. The comfrey in his beds traced back to a Quaker smallholder named Henry Doubleday. Doubleday imported Russian comfrey from St. Petersburg to Essex to try turning it into glue for postage stamps. The glue plan failed. The plant stayed. When Doubleday died, his relatives burned his research notes. Hills founded the Henry Doubleday Research Association so that would not happen again. From those plants he bred more than 20 numbered strains. One survived as the standard: Barking 14, sterile, so it cannot spread by seed, rich in potassium, propagated only by root cuttings. 1 crown becomes 10. 10 become 100. Hills made sure that this time nobody could burn the notes. What he actually measured when he put Barking 14 to the test is why the organic movement adopted it as a standard, and why you have almost certainly never seen it in a garden center. Modern research has finally put numbers on what farmers knew, not to prove them right, but to show why it worked on a level no one could measure. Fermented rice water. In 2021, a study in the journal Sustainability tracked what happens when you ferment the cloudy water left from rinsing rice. After 3 days, bacterial populations reached over 100 million colony-forming units per milliliter. Nitrogen-fixing activity increased. Potassium locked in the soil became more available. And the liquid produced auxin, the hormone that drives root growth. Comfrey as a potassium pump. Comfrey sends taproots 8 to 10 feet into the ground, reaching soil layers ordinary crops never touch. Its leaves carry roughly 2 to 3 times as much potassium as farmyard manure, more than most people expect from a roadside weed. If manure tea is your baseline, comfrey is a vertical pump that drags fertilizer up from deep subsoil and stores it in leaves you can cut several times a year. Compost tea and nettle. In a greenhouse trial, compost tea made from sheep manure, compost reduced gray mold on tomatoes by more than 95% over 9 weeks, as beneficial microbes crowded the leaf and root zones. Researchers like Linda Chalker Scott, looking across home brews, point out that most batches add too few microbes to overhaul an established soil ecosystem, and that sloppy brewing can spread disease. That is the honest version. Real suppression in certain conditions against diseases, not a cure for everything. Dried nettle leaves contain roughly 5 to 7% nitrogen by weight. The finished liquid, diluted for use, runs around 2-0.5-1.5 NPK, that is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and carries silicates, iron, manganese, and calcium. In 2017, after a formal review, the European Commission authorized nettle, Urtica dioica, as a basic substance for plant protection. That 2017 ruling was not a discovery, it was an admission. And yet none of this appears on a fertilizer label. The question is why? This is where the story stops being about gardening and starts being about who decides what you are allowed to pour on your own soil. It wasn't on the list of authorized plant protection products. Under French rules, that made it illegal to market, and by extension, illegal to promote or describe. In 2006, the Agricultural Orientation Law turned that interpretation into a national rule. Sharing the nettle manure recipe, writing it down, printing it, handing it out, became a violation. Gardeners responded by doing the one thing the law couldn't quite stomach. They stood at weekly markets and handed out the banned recipe and jars of the brew. Newspapers called it La guerre du purin d'ortie, the nettle manure war. In April 2011, the Ministry of Agriculture lifted the ban. 6 years later, in 2017, the European Commission authorized nettle as a basic substance for plant protection. While the recipe was illegal, bottled nettle products remained on sale, with concentrated ready-to-use versions listed at prices up to €240 per liter. The weed in the ditch was free. The method to turn it into fertilizer was criminalized, but the branded liquid made from the same plant was not. The pattern repeats with compost tea. A bucket, a small pump, and mature compost can produce a liquid rich in microbes. But the moment the air pump shuts off, the culture starts dying. You cannot stack that on pallets with a 5-year expiry date. What fits that system are substances you can patent, register, and move in sealed containers. Recipes that rely on weeds, kitchen scraps, and patience don't. The fact that a government spent 6 years trying to stop people from writing down a weed recipe tells you more about what it can do than any label ever will. For most of human history, nobody called these recipes. They were just what you did so the soil would keep feeding you. Here is how to make each of the 5 safely. Fermented rice water. Rinse a cup of uncooked rice in 2 cups of water. Keep the cloudy water, cover it loosely, and leave it 3 days. Dilute about 1 part to 10 parts clean water. Pour it around the roots of a plant that has stopped growing. Within a week, the soil around it comes back to life, and the plant follows. Manure tea. Use only well-aged manure. Put a shovelful into an old pillowcase or mesh sack, tie it, and submerge it in a bucket of water for 3 to 5 days. Dilute until it looks like weak iced tea, roughly 1 part to 10. Pour it around the base of anything that looks pale and exhausted. Allow 90 to 120 days between any raw manure contact and harvest. Aerated compost tea. Fill a bucket with rainwater or tap water that has sat uncovered for a day. Put 2 cups of mature compost or worm castings into a mesh bag and drop it in. Attach an aquarium air pump and bubble air through for 24 to 36 hours. Use the tea within 4 to 6 hours as a soil drench or light foliar spray. This is the one you reach for when a plant looks like it is losing a fight it should be winning. Comfrey tea. Pack fresh comfrey leaves into a bucket of water, cover it, and leave it for 3 to 4 weeks. Strain and dilute 1 part to 10 before using on soil. For a stronger concentrate, pack leaves into a container with a small hole at the base, weight them down, and add no water. Over a few weeks, a dark liquid drips out. Use that at around 1 part to 15 or 1 part to 20. Comfrey is for plants only. Because of liver-toxic pyrrolizidin alkaloids, it is not a safe tea for people. Nettle manure. With gloves on, cut nettle tips before flowering. Use 1 kilogram of nettles to 10 liters of rainwater in a plastic or wooden barrel. Cover it, but not airtight. Stir once a day. After 1 to 2 weeks, when it stops bubbling, strain it. Dilute 1 part to 10 to feed soil, 1 part to 20 as a spray against aphids and mild fungal problems. None of this requires a store. None of it requires a label. It requires only a bucket and the knowledge the generation before us already had. In 2006, writing down a recipe for weed water could get you fined in France. If your great-grandmother could see how easy it still is to make them for yourself, what do you think she'd tell you to do with your next bucket of weeds?